Salve Latin 1 students, welcome back. And we're kind of this week finishing up the final chapter, chapter 17, getting ready for our quiz by the end of this week. Today I thought we'd start off with a fact of the day and learn some mythology before we move on to our last assignment, which was exercise E on page 97. So we are going to go over that, but first we'll do our fact of the day. So make sure to get a few good notes on this story. The story may appear on the next quiz. It's a very famous mythological story. You've probably at least heard of it, called Daedalus and Icarus, but you might not know the details, Daedalus and Icarus. Now, starting off with Daedalus, we've met Daedalus before in another story. He should have come up at least a little bit, and that was a story on the Minotaur. If you remember, the Minotaur was that large kind of bull man beast that was trapped in the labyrinth on the island of Crete. Well, the man who built the labyrinth in that story, he was an inventor, engineer, very intelligent, was called Daedalus. So we've seen him at least before. We know he's smart. We know he was working for the king of Crete called Minos. Now, this story comes after that, after the whole thing with the Minotaur. And if you remember, Theseus killed the Minotaur, and then the girl Ariadne, who was Minos' daughter, escaped from the island. Just a little reminder what happened there. So, as a consequence to that whole story, the king, Minos, was very upset at Daedalus because Daedalus had given Ariadne help and instructions on how to assist Theseus escaping the labyrinth. So he had helped, and Minos thought that that was a terrible decision because he didn't want the Minotaur to be killed by Theseus. He also didn't want his daughter Ariadne to escape, which also happened. So he wanted to punish Daedalus after that. So that's where this comes in. So what he does to punish Daedalus is he decides to build a special prison cell for him, a special prison. And he builds this prison that's kind of a tall tower, and there's only one way in at the bottom, and it's manned by guards 24/7, and there's only one way off, and that's through the top of the doorway. And you can't get out the doorway because there's guards. If you jump at the top, of course you'll die. It's a tall tower. And so basically he's thrown into this prison, and this is his punishment. And for good measure, Minos throws his son in there, even though his son didn't have much to do with it. He wants to punish Daedalus even further, so he puts his son called Icarus in there. So Daedalus and Icarus are both imprisoned, basically, for what happened with the whole Minotaur story we did before, right? So after they've been in this prison for a little while, Daedalus says, I can't believe I've done this to my son. What have I done here? How can I get him out? This is, it's a terrible thing. How do I get out of this? And he knows he can't fight his way out. He's kind of an older guy by this point, and he's not going to fight through the guards or anything. The only way to go is through the air. And of course, if he jumps off, he's going to die. But Daedalus, again, he's really smart. He's an inventor. He does things like this. That's what he's always done. So he starts thinking, is there some contraption I can build to get us off this tower without dying through over the top, right? Because the top wasn't guarded. No one thought that he would be stupid enough to jump off. So the top was unguarded. So he starts getting whatever, bits and things he can find. He gathers supplies over time. And eventually he starts building these wings for him and his son. And the idea was that if I can get these working, get these going, we'll jump off the tower and be able to fly our way to safety. And that's what you see here with Daedalus. He's kind of getting Icarus ready with the wings. He's fashioning them. Probably took him a few tries to get them right. Kind of a cool postage stamp here. This is Hellas, the Greek word for Greece, as you can see right there. That's a cool stamp. And finally, he gets to what he thinks is going to be the correct wings to fly away. He thinks they'll work. Obviously, he can't test them perfectly because there's only one way to test them. That's to jump off. But he does as much as he can. And he thinks he's going to hold together and let them fly. And they're made out of actual feathers and also wax that's holding them together, and probably some other things as well. But wax and feathers is what's holding it all together. So here you see him putting it on his son Icarus, and lots of paintings about this story. It's a very famous story. And so here you see another one of him getting his son ready and putting the wings on his son. And here you see kind of a weird Daedalus statue with the wings and everything. So as they're getting prepared to try this, basically he'd rather try this and possibly die trying than stay in this terrible prison his whole life. So as they're doing this, he gives his son some instructions on how to fly, right? What we need to do is we need to fly away from this island. Remember, they're on an island called Crete. We're going to fly back to the mainland of Greece. But when we're flying, we need to make sure not to go too high or too low. We need to just calmly fly through kind of the mid part of the sky to get back to Greece, right? If we go too high, you get near the sun, and the wax is not good when it comes in contact with heat. If you get too low, you're going to get near the ocean, and when water gets on the feathers, that's also bad. So don't go too crazy. And so he gives his son instructions as best he can, and then finally they go for it one day. They decide it's the perfect weather, and they both put on their wings and they jump off the tower, and the wings work. And it's probably pretty incredible. They're both actually flying, and that's got to be an incredible feeling. And they're flying away from the island, and everything's going great. Everything's going fine. It's a pretty good distance if you look on a map between Crete and Greece, though. So they have many miles to cover. So it's not like they're flying for 5 minutes. It's going to take them hours to get back to Greece. So things are going pretty well. The wings are working, and Icarus he's young. Obviously, he's young. He's younger. He's a young man, and he's a little bit excited to be flying. Probably most of us would be. And eventually, he starts kind of testing out his abilities once he gets the hang of it. So he's flying a little faster. He's doing loops. He's showing off. His dad tries to warn him, please, just kind of be calm. Let's get these back to the mainland. Just be calm. But Icarus is flying up. He's flying down. Again, he's just kind of getting a little carried away. Eventually, you could probably tell what's happening. He flies a little too high. He gets a little bit too close to the sun, and what starts happening? The wings, the wax starts melting. Even just a little bit is enough to have the feathers start to kind of fall apart a little bit. And once that wax starts melting, it's hard to stop that. And then all of a sudden, his wings start falling apart. Icarus can no longer fly, and he starts plunging to the water below. And that is what you see here in this painting of Daedalus looking on as his son Icarus falls into the water. So it's a pretty scary thing. Now, again, they were very high, so falling out of the water, you might think, oh, he's going to fall into water. No, if you fall into water from a very tall distance, that's going to kill you, right? That's why you never jump off a bridge into the water or something, because it's not like a diving board. It's going to hurt you. And so Daedalus basically has to watch his son Icarus fall to his death. Daedalus can't save him. There's no way he can hold up two people with his wings. And this is just kind of a terrible thing for Daedalus to look on to. Now, there's a common saying that comes from this. If you ever hear someone say that so-and-so flew too close to the sun or something like that, it's a saying that comes to this story. And basically it means someone who took things too far and it cost them maybe their lives or made some kind of bad consequence. So not necessarily flying, obviously, but it just means figuratively someone who pushed the boundaries too much and it finally caught up with them and hurt them. So that's kind of what happened to Icarus. And the moral of this story, of course, there's always morals to these stories. The moral of this story, if you think about it, if you're a Roman or Greek child, what are you thinking when you hear this story? Well, the first moral probably be listen to your parents, because if he had listened to his father, he wouldn't have died in this way, right? And also maybe be a little more modest and temper your emotions, right? When it's time to be calm, be calm. Don't be trying to fly too close to the sun. So maybe a little moral there also. So when Daedalus falls into the sea, he does die there, and Daedalus can't save him. Daedalus has to keep on flying, of course. Eventually, Icarus's body washes up onto an island that a few people live there, not a ton of people, but Icarus washes up onto an island, and it's even harder for Daedalus because his son dies in a really bad way for the Greeks, which would be dying at sea because you can't be buried. We talked before in class about how burial was very important to get into the underworld. So the fact that his son would die at sea is even worse because you can't give him a proper burial to get into the underworld. I've always loved this relief sculpture here showing Daedalus looking on his son Icarus, and you see the prison back there, the tower. You see the sun kind of beating down on the wax, and that's what happened. And you even see the labyrinth back here on Crete. So kind of a cool, the whole story played out in just one picture. So when Icarus finally lands on that, he didn't land on it, but he washes up on that island. He's eventually found by some people who find his body. They're probably very confused because it's, what's going on with this man with wings here, but this island, and they give him a proper burial like he's supposed to have. And so that's kind of part of the story, at least ends well, him getting the burial. Now, this is a real island. Of course, this story isn't real, but there is a real island that is supposedly named after the man Icarus, who washed up onto its shore thousands of years ago, and it's called Ikaria. And this is a picture again of the real Greek island. So kind of cool. Again, the island's not named after this because it's really happened per se, but is there some story involving someone named Icarus and they kind of became conflicted in the mythological accounts? There may be something going on there, but it is kind of cool that there's a real island named after Icarus. Yeah. So that's our fact of the day. Make sure to have some notes on that story. It's a super famous story. So if you were to Google that story, you would probably see 100 different retellings and recountings of that story if you need to as you study. Okay. Now let's move on to your assignment, which was exercise E on page 97. And you want to make sure that you've already done this on your own. These are English to Latin sentences, so it's so much more helpful if I show you these. You can kind of see what you did, compare it to what I've given you, and that's how you learn and pick up things and do better. So make sure you've already tried this, and then I'll go over it with you right here. You can pause it if you need to kind of take a look at a sentence for a sec and make sure you understand it. And also at the end, if there's something you still don't get from my explanations, make sure to pop in and see me in my office hours so I can help you with any problems or mistakes you're making. Okay, let's try the first one, which was we stayed on the mountain for a long time. This is one of our new verbs, to stay, isn't it? Now, do you know your principal parts yet? Because the parts are crucial here. Stay is maneo, manere, mansi, mansum. Make sure you're practicing your vocabulary. So we stayed would be perfect tense, wouldn't it? ED. So third principal part, perfect tense would be mansimus. And then mansimus diu in monte. We stayed on the mountain is ablative of place where in monte. That's ablative of a third declension word, by the way. And then for a long time is simply the adverb diu, as you can see right here. So mansimus diu in monte. Pretty straightforward, but really important to understand your new second cause negation verbs. They will be on this next quiz, this final quiz on Friday. Okay. So that's a good start. Number 2 is the soldiers will soon break camp. So this one I came up with milites castra movebunt mox. Okay. Now what's going on here? The soldiers is nominative. The camp castra is accusative. Does this look accusative to you? Maybe some of you thought castram or something. Well, no. If you remember this word, it's actually plural only, and it's neuter second declension plural. So the accusative ending would go a, orm, is, a. So castra is the accusative, by the way. Now, what about the verb? You might be thinking this verb means to move, doesn't it? Well, it does usually, but we talked about idioms when I did the notes recently, and idiom is when two words come together to take on a special meaning when they're used with each other, right? So whenever moeo and castra are used together, they mean to break camp, and I made the verb future because will break camp. So moebunt is the future tense sign, and then mox, of course, is a simple adverb that means soon. All right. But remember, an idiom is when two words come together to take on a special meaning. We will have other idioms later on in Latin, but I think this is our first one of the year. Okay. So that's a good start with number 2. Number 3, Lucius, are you holding the small animal? For this one, I said, Luci tenesne animal parvum. So I made, remember Lucius, you're talking to him. So what case do you need when you're talking to someone? The vocative, right? So I made Lucius's name vocative, Luci. Remember, IUS words go to I in the vocative. And then are you holding sounds like present tense, doesn't it? So tinnes is the present tense, you, second person, by the way. And then ne makes it a question. So tinnes, ne. And then finally, small animal needs to be accusative because it's the direct object of holding. So we have animal parvum. These are both accusative. Why don't they look exactly the same? Because animal is third declension, parvum is second declension, but they are both accusative, neuter, singular. And by the way, this word's neuter, that's why parvum, that's why I use a neuter ending. Okay. Okay, so that's good explanation number 3. The word to hold, you might have also thought to use the word habeo, which does mean to hold, but teneo is a little bit better here just because it means to hold like in a physical, tangible manner. Here, that's what seems to be going on. So I wouldn't count habes wrong here, but tenes is slightly better. Okay, number 4, girls warn the farmer there is a fire in the farmhouse. The semicolon means that the two sides of that are kind of grammatically separate. So girls is vocative. And then what are you doing with warn? Warn the farmer. That sounds like an order, doesn't it? Warn the farmer. So orders are imperative, if you remember. So the imperative plural form of warn, moneo, is monete. Why is it plural? Because you're talking to the girl. You're talking to more than one person. So puellai monete agricolam, and then this is the direct object. That's why it's accusative. Now the next part of the sentence, the verb is there is, est. And then fire is the subject, so est ignis. And then finally in the farmhouse is ablative of a place where, in villa. So puellai monete agricolam est ignis in villa would be the full sentence. Okay, so kind of a 2-part sentence there. Number 5, our father saw a long river in Spain. This one we came up with pater noster flumen longum in Hispania vidit. Pater noster, nominative. Our Father is the subject. Long river is the object because it's what we saw. Flumen longum is accusative. Why is this accusative? Remember, the word flumen is neuter. So the nominative and accusative will look the same. Flumen, fluminis, flumini, flumen, flumine. So flumen longum is accusative. Habit of a place where in Hispania. And then finally, saw. Make sure you have the right verb form because video is from this chapter. It's video, videre, vidi, visum are the four pencil parts. We need perfect tense here for saw. So vidit is the perfect stem followed by the perfect ending. Okay, so this is perfect tense, third person singular. Okay, so a lot there in number 5. Number 6, my brother is sitting on the small bridge. I got meus frater in parvo ponte sedet. My brother, meus frater, is nominative, is sitting, sedet. That's present tense, by the way. Notice how if you cut off that T, that's the present stem, and then T makes it third person, so sedet is present. And then finally, on the small bridge is habit of a place where? In parvo ponte. In parvo ponte. So that is masculine. Pons pontus, bridge. That's why parvo, I left masculine as well. Okay, number 7, the enemy do not fear our men. Hostes non timent nostros. A couple things in the sentence. Number 1, the enemy sounds kind of singular when you hear it at first, but silence this. But when you, in Latin, you talk about the enemy, you're talking about a group of people, aren't you? The enemy. It sounds like a big group, like the enemy of Rome. And so you have to make it plural, even though it kind of sounds singular in English. That is how that works. Now, do not fear needs to also be present. Do not fear, so non timent. And then finally, do not fear our men. Our men are accusative because they're the direct object. So I put nostros. Now notice what I did here. I made a substantive for our men. I just said nostros. You could have also said nostros viros if you wanted to. That's not wrong, but I just chose to use a substantive here because the Romans would have liked to do that sometimes. So hostes is nominative, nostros is the object, it's accusative. Okay, that's good. Number 8, the captives do not have much money, do they? And I'm missing a question mark here. Of course, in English, there should be a question mark. Excuse me for that. But let's look at the Latin. Now, is this a question that leads us one way or the other? The captives don't have much money, do they? That sounds like a question that expects a no answer. So that's starting with num. Num captivi multam pecuniam habent. Okay. Multam pecuniam is the direct object, so it's accusative. Much money is the object. And then finally, they don't have. That sounds like a present tense. Do not have. And so habent is present tense. I made it plural to match up with captivi, which is also nominative plural. Okay. Here, habeo is a better verb, a good verb to use because this means to have, not in a tangible sense, but just like to possess something, which is more like what habeo means. Teneo means to more literally hold something physically in your hand or tangibly in your hand. Okay. So we got number 8 there. Number 9, the consuls will have warned the citizens of the danger. So I got consules cives de periculo monuerint. Now I made the consuls nominative because they're the subject, and the citizens are accusative because they're the direct object. The verb will have warned. What tense is that? Did you get the tense there? The consuls will have warned. Will have done something is the future perfect tense. So notice how I use the perfect stem, monui, from the verb warn, moneo, monere, monui, monitum. And then the future perfect ending is erint. That's always been the future perfect ending. So monuerint is will have warned, future perfect. Now maybe the toughest part here of number 9, I'm not sure, but of the danger. Usually of shows possession. Usually, right? Like this is a friend of my father or something. But of isn't really showing possession here, is it? What is it showing? The consuls will have warned the citizens of the danger. Isn't it kind of synonymous with they will have warned the citizens about danger? It means the same thing. So in English, of and about can be used interchangeably in this way. And so we don't actually need genitive here. We need the word that means about, which in Latin is, of course, de, taking the ablative. So that's why I put de periculo. That's why genitive is not needed here. So of does not always mean genitive. It means genitive when it's used in a possessive sense. So maybe that part was tricky, but I wanted to explain it to you. And finally, number 10, tell the boys a story about Julius Caesar. So it sounds like an order, doesn't it? Tell the boys. So nara is the imperative. Now nara assumes you're talking to one person. We don't really know here, so if you made it plural, I can understand that. But I thought probably it was just singular because you're saying tell a story. Now, did you think the boys was the direct object? Maybe that was a tricky part here. It's actually the story that's the direct object because that's what you're telling. The boys are receiving the story, so they're the indirect object. What case does indirect object go into? Dative, pueris. Notice how that's dative. Fabulum is accusative. And then about Julius Caesar would be the word for about, which is day. And then Julius Caesar would go in the ablative. Remember, both of these words can decline into the ablative. Day, Julio Caesare, ablative. This is second declension. This is third declension. That's why the endings are different. So nada pueris fabulum de Julio Caesare. And I notice I have the opposite problem here. I have a question mark. I need to fix both of those, but that's just a statement. Okay, but the grammar looks right on this one. So hopefully as we've gone through 1 through 10, giving you some ideas on what you're getting right and what you still need to work on for this big quiz, okay? I hope you guys, this has helped you to get better at this chapter. Remember the rest of this week, we're gonna be doing some practice and review, some vocab and stuff like we usually do to review for quizzes. And then Friday will be our last quiz of the year. So it's a big one. So work hard this week. The end is in sight. Friday is the quiz, and Friday kind of finishes up for us. So keep the end is in sight. Keep it up. We got 4 more days to go. Okay. Hope you guys are doing awesome. I will return the next few days with some practice before our quiz on Friday, and I'll talk to you very soon. Walete.